I'm Anne Heraty. I am founder of CPL and I'm now non-executive director.
One of Ireland's most successful entrepreneurs, Anne Heraty, set up recruitment business CPL in 1989, aged 29. A decade later, Ms Heraty became the first female chief executive of an Irish publicly quoted company when she floated the business. Ms Heraty was chosen as the EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2006 and later became the chairperson of the judging panel for the awards.
I grew up in a family business, a small village in County Longford. We had a shop, pub, farm, and my dad was the local undertaker. Growing up in the 70s and 80s in Ireland was pretty tough. And I certainly have a lot of memories from that time, particularly in the 70s. I remember land prices had gone through the roof. And you know, farmers were competing with each other to buy land, and that all ended in disaster. And living in a small community, you see some very sad things first time when you see people getting over leveraged. One of the things I learned growing up in a family business was the importance of not overextending yourself from a leverage point of view. And I think one of the notable things about CPL is we would always have been accused of being conservative in terms of our cash management and cash generation. And in fact, some people would say we were too conservative, but it has worked out well for us in the end, because actually at times of crisis, we were in the position to make some really good moves. And it was often in very challenging and difficult times in CPL that we made our best acquisitions. So I grew up in a family business, so business was all around me. And you know, it was a typical local business in a local community. So like, I understood very well the contribution that business makes to a community, and just the marvellous benefits. And I saw my mother, who was very passionate about business in particular. My father was too, but he was much more a kind of an engineering type mindset, more an analytical type person, whereas my mother was very driven, ambitious for all of her children. My mother was a big influence on my life, and indeed, of course, on all my brothers and sisters as well. While we grew up in a small village, she was absolutely passionate about education, and she constantly said to us, you know, you've got to move out of here and move on. There are much bigger opportunities out in the world. So I think that was a huge influence to us. I think also too, watching her in business, her approach to customer service. You know, I might have to work in the shop and I mightn't be happy about it, so I could be a bit cross. And she instilled in me that we don't know, when somebody comes into your business or into your environment, you have no idea what their day has been like or what they've gone through. So that fundamental piece of respect, your respect for the people you work with, the respect for your customers, was instilled in me at a very early age. So CPL started from very humble beginnings. One thing for sure was that I was absolutely passionate that I wanted to specialise in the tech sector, and I wanted to build the deepest knowledge I could of that sector so as I could support people in terms of their careers. So I started literally with a desk and a phone in a small office in College Green. My rent for my first year in business was £9,000 at the time, and the marketplace was particularly tough. Unemployment peaked in 1992, and I had set up the business or incorporated the company in March 1990. So at a time of high unemployment, recruitment is not the easiest place to be. Certainly those first few years were very challenging. And I think maybe one of the things that you say, was I optimistic at the time? I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to always have a level of optimism, but in many ways, I believe setting up a business sometimes comes out of necessity as much as out of opportunity. So I didn't have anything to lose. I was earning, very low money really. And I spent a lot of those first couple of years actually counselling people about how to manage their careers. Now, there wasn't any fee generation in that, but the goodwill that I suppose gave me was really helpful then once the market took off. So I'm a great believer in what goes around comes around, giving back a little bit. That certainly helped, because a lot of the people that I had spoken to in that sort of 1990 to 92, 93 era later became my clients, because they all got excellent jobs. They were working in the tech sector, but the tech sector indeed even then was going through a tough time, and a lot of companies had pulled out of Ireland in the late 80s and early 90s. But then, of course, we know what happened in 92, 93. A whole wave of new companies came in, and also the Irish software industry was really starting to grow at a pace. Tech was really a good place to be. The early 90s was certainly a challenging time in the recruitment business. But once we started to get into the sort of mid-90s, we started to see unemployment was coming down at a pace and our business was growing. One of the things I've always been conscious about is to make sure that I have the best team we could possibly have. And in a lot of ways, I probably overhired, even given the size of the business at the time. That's what really drove our growth. We're a people business. You've got to have an excellent team. So as we come into the late 90s, the whole dot-com explosion is happening, the whole Y2K market is taking off. Our technology contracting business was absolutely flying. Things were really good. And at that point, we decided that we wanted to expand outside Ireland, and I also wanted to give the team a chance to participate in the success of the company through share option schemes. So we went public in 1999, just at the height of the dot-com mania. But no sooner were we a public company, we'd raised our funds, than the next thing we face into the whole collapse of the dot-com in 2000 and 2001. So that was an incredible crisis, having to work through it in the public eye, which we would certainly not have been used to, sort of added to the pressure. We got together and we decided we'd need to devise a new strategy for the business. I mean, the business had absolutely fallen off a cliff. Uncertainty is going to be with us forever. I just think we live in an uncertain world, and we've got to learn to adapt and roll with the punches. And I think we're pretty good at that. So I'm optimistic, definitely. I think if I look back to what I learned out of that whole dot-com crash, where yes, there was massive destruction, but equally companies like Amazon came out. The iPod was launched around that time. So there are always good things happening in the world. And it was at that time that we decided that we would never again be reliant on any one sector, as we were with the tech sector, or any one geography, or indeed any one service. We were largely a permanent and contract recruitment company at that stage. So it was out of that time that the whole diversification of CPL came about. We started to grow specialist businesses within different sectors. And if you look at CPL today, our sort of four largest sectors that we operate within, tech is still major for us. We have a very significant healthcare business, we have an outsourcing business, and we have a pharma life sciences business. So these are fantastic sectors to work in, and sectors that have continued to grow, and certainly continued to grow through that period. And I think it's similar now. We're in a transition. It'll be challenging. It'll be particularly challenging, I think, from a workforce and labour market point of view. So I think we do, as business people, have a responsibility to our people to help them upskill and keep their skills current, scan the horizon for what's coming ahead. But I think, as in all times, there's always reason to be optimistic and there's always opportunity. I had worked in recruitment for a couple of years before I set up CPL. And one of the reasons I set up CPL was because I was absolutely passionate about helping people to reach their full potential. And in order to do that, I knew I had to have an absolute depth of knowledge of the sectors and the opportunities within the areas in which they were working. One of the things I always find fascinating is when I hear about people setting up a business and the first thing they're thinking about is their exit. Well, I just don't think I could have set up a business with an exit in mind. I set up a business because I wanted us to be the best that we could be within our industry. The motivation was never about being the biggest, but it was always about being the best that we could possibly be. And I think when when I think about CPL, it's a business now 32 years in existence, and certainly I wasn't thinking about exits until maybe the last 3 to 4 years, despite all the ups and downs that we were through. I think it's really important to be passionate about what you do, but I would also add to that, I feel that there's a lot of pressure on young people when they're being constantly told, oh, you must find your passion. I think it can take a long time sometimes to find the thing that you're passionate about. So what I say to people is that you should love what you do, not do what you love. So for example, I might love dancing, but I don't think I'd ever make a career in that. On the other hand, I absolutely love the whole recruitment business. I love working with people to help them reach their full potential. So I think really that piece of no matter what your job you're doing, do it to the very best of your ability. And I think then it will be noticed. And it's often the thing then that leads to your passion. What I do think is important though is to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and to remember that every job that you're in teaches you skills. It teaches you how to get on with people. It teaches you how to handle conflict. You learn some hard skills as well as learning skills that are called soft skills, but in my world, I think of them as hard skills. Certainly, I've had to deal with adversity a number of times through my career, and I think that's no different to anyone else in the world. Adversity is just part of life, and I think that's something that I now understand very well. In terms of how I've dealt with the blows that have come along the way, I think it's about standing back a little bit, taking stock, trying to build in some level of flexibility or adaptability into your personality. But I think one of the things that has always got me through are the relationships that I have with other people and that extended network. One of the things that I found very difficult early in my career was to ask for help. But actually, I think when you're going through really challenging times, asking for help is critically important. It's one of the things I love about the EY Entrepreneur of the Year network, in that there's always somebody who has experienced something maybe even more challenging than you're going through at a particular period in time. And actually, people love to offer their support and are very generous with it. So I think in terms of dealing with adversity, I think we've just got to get used to the fact that all through our lives, good things will happen, but also there'll be some tough times as well. I think we can be a little bit unfair to the younger generations and say that they don't have the same maybe resilience or adaptability that we have. That's not my experience at all. In fact, they're dealing with different challenges and different issues to what we're dealing with, and I think they will adapt and do adapt very well to those challenges. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but that's okay too. One of the things that I've always been incredibly mindful about in growing CPL is our culture. And you know that saying, culture eats strategy every day. Well, I'm a great believer in that. Now, as we continue with this hybrid and particularly remote working environment, I think minding the cultures of our business, how people engage, is going to be ever more challenging. People work for people generally that they like. They stay with companies that they feel have a culture that matches their values, and that's really how they engage and how they get fulfillment as well from their work. Now, in a situation where we're in a totally remote environment, where your boss is in one country, your colleagues are maybe in a different county or a different country, it takes a different skill set to build that culture and to keep that engagement alive. We had some experience doing it through the pandemic, but my concern is that in the more longer term, if we go too remote in terms of our working environment, we're going to see an even bigger rise in loneliness, maybe more mental health issues. I think fundamentally we as human beings want to connect, we want to build relationships with people, and therefore I think while hybrid works very well, I think it's important that we stay mindful of the importance of that connectivity. One of the things that I absolutely look for in leaders in my business is their judgment. That ability to make good judgment calls, I think it's absolutely essential in an entrepreneurial business. I've had lots of examples of that in terms of my career, when we've made some of our best acquisitions in really tough times, when it wouldn't have been the obvious thing to do to make a move at that particular time. And I'm thinking particularly back, after the 2001, 2002 crisis, and again in 2010 we made an acquisition of a phenomenal company at that time. So I think one of the things that I certainly learned from then is that Ireland is very open to external shocks to our economy. So if you think that period of time between 2002 and 2007, 2008, interest rates were really low. Ireland's economy was clearly overheating. We didn't need to have low interest rates, but nevertheless, because our interest rate environment was dictated to us from the EU, we had that. So I think one of the things I've learned is that we've got to be mindful always in Ireland about external shocks and scanning the horizon to see where the risks are coming from. I think lots of times we thought that we had diversified because maybe we had diversified across sectors, but actually, if you think about even the property crash, we were all buying property from each other and scaling up the prices, and we're a very small market. So I think it's about really fundamentally understanding where risk lies and where risk is taking place, and having that, I suppose, instinct to know when to move. That ability to make good judgment calls is hugely critical in business. Can it be taught? I'm not so sure. I think you can certainly improve through developing your business acumen, through learning from the failures and the mistakes you make. I think that's one of the key things, is to learn from those mistakes. And I particularly like that quote around failure that says, it's not about the falling down that's the failure, it's the staying down. So, when tough things happen to you, just being able to get back up and get going again. But I think experience too feeds your instincts. Some people have it naturally, others develop it as they go.